Hi everyone! Today we are continuing with this Paw Patrol illustration, and in this video we will be painting Marshall. I feel like he was one of the easier ones, so if you thought that previous ones were kind of complicated, maybe you should try this one. First thing I'm doing is preparing my Pyrrole Scarlet. It's a perfect fiery red that is pretty much all over Marshall's costume and mask, and I first put it all over the mask in an even wash, and then as always lift some highlighted areas. Now I'm taking new gamboge and putting it all over the middle of the mask. Here I'm mixing cadmium-free orange with Pyrrole Scarlet, and it will help me to create this gradient and dimension in his face. For the insides of his ears, I'm using the same mixture. I'm just adding a bit more water, so the value would be much lighter and not so bright. Same for his tongue, but this time the paint is a little bit more thick. In illustrations like this, you always see me doing the same thing. I'm always laying down an even wash of color and then lift highlights. I feel like only this way you're able to get natural looking highlights, and it's also a very easy technique to master in watercolor. His whole costume is a variation of different values of reds, so the palette I'm using is very limited, but that's probably a good thing. You definitely don't need 20 colors to paint something like that. Here I'm creating a separate bottle with Pyrrole Scarlet, and this time I'm adding neutral tint to darken the mixture. I will be using it for the parts that are in shadow and any folds in his costume. With a pure Pyrrole Scarlet, I'm starting to build dimension in his face. As always, I go around the eyes and then carefully blend with a clean and damp brush. I'm using my darker mixture again for building up shadow in the insides of the ears, and after I blend carefully, I take a straight up neutral tint, blot it on a paper towel so I won't have too much water on the brush, and put it just on the rim to finish off the gradient. Marshall has this bright yellow and orange glow around his paw, so I'm starting with Hansa Yellow Medium and I'm putting it all over this area. And side note, as with previous dogs, I put masking fluid around the paw itself and also sparingly all around, which will help me then to create this glowing effect as on the reference image. I use a very watered down orangey mixture for the paws, and after laying down the initial wash, I start building the same color around, creating dimension. While painting illustrations like this, you can often face a problem that there is not enough separation and everything looks like a blob. And with watercolor, you most of the time can only go darker, but going darker would not solve a problem if you didn't preserve highlights. So my advice would be always to lay down the lightest values and then slowly build them up. It resembles botanical art a lot, where you need all the petals to look separated, but in order to do so, the petal beneath must be darker and the edge of the petal that is above always should have a highlight. If it's too late and you've already forgotten to preserve a highlight, my best advice would be to use a little bit of gouache to bring it back, but not to go even darker underneath to try to create bigger contrast. This would only overwork your painting and most likely become too messy and dirty looking. As Marshall is Dalmatian, he's supposed to be white, but in paintings, nothing is actually white. It always has the lightest value of some color. In this case, I'm using a tea consistency of neutral tint, and I go all over his ears and face with it. I'm quite careful here with building up dimension in his paws, as this area is so small I can't be quick with laying down color. Each stroke should be extremely precise, and what is even more crucial, water control. If you have too much water on your brush, you run into a potential of ruining the whole area, so it's even better to have almost dry brush than going with too much water. Please always keep a paper towel on hand, sometimes it can really save your painting. With a bit more saturated neutral tint, probably like milk consistency, I start building dimension in his face. And I don't know why, maybe because of the angle of this dog, but he was the easiest. Just a couple of strokes on the top of the ears and around the mouth, and it already looked great. His left side though has orangey reflection, so here you see me laying that down. Dalmatians have spots, and I'm putting them in with a thick amount of neutral tint. And since I already had this pigment on my brush, I also filled in his eyebrows and nose. And as always, don't forget to lift a highlighted area in the nose. Straight up Pyrrole Scarlet here, as I thought that his paw pads lacked a little bit of contrast. His eyes are blue, and I always like to use phthalo blue. I think it's my favorite blue out of them all. So I first lay down a light value of this pigment all over his irises, and then I take a little bit of pigment straight from the pan and I go over the rims. It's so easy to do, but it looks 1,000 times better than just a single color. With neutral tint, I'm now defining his mouth, and then you will also see me using the same pigment to fill in the pupils of the eyes. Here I'm taking Hansa Yellow Medium and I'm using it to create this glow effect around his paw. I'm now taking my cadmium-free orange and making marks in the yellow. My marks resemble lightning or something like that. It doesn't need to be perfect, just create an impression of that. In the end, as always, I took off the masking fluid and went over with a clean brush to soften the edges. I also added a bit more color in the areas that lacked contrast, and that was it. I hope you love this series so far, and we still have a long way to go, so I would love to see you in my next video. Bye!